Telehealth, I think, really helped some of my clients, actually. They benefited from that, and we might even see more of that going on in the future. Hello everyone, this is Francesca. Welcome to the Franny Pack. As you could tell by the thumbnail, this is going to be spilling some tea. I have some hypothetical tea. I'm more of a coffee drinker, so that's what I have with me. And we're going to talk about some Q&A questions. We're going to talk about grad school. I have a lot of different Q&A videos planned, and I decided it's probably best to separate them on content. So this one is going to be about a day in the life of a grad school student, especially during COVID. There's a lot of these questions have been requested by undergraduate students and graduate students who are potential graduate students who are looking at programs right now. And I also looked at a couple other common questions. Also, I did not realize how warm I would be in this sweater. This is like for any of those 90 babies out there, this is like that kind of fuzzy material that socks used to be made out of. I had a couple of sweaters also like this in third grade. I remember specifically second and third grade. And I love this material. It is so warm and so cute and soft. But at the same time, I'm like dying in here. But I think I got this for like $3 at H&M. So if you're looking for a cute fuzzy sweater, H&M, it was on sale. They probably have other colors too. I just saw the pink and I was like, I really, really like this. And it's so easy and simple to put on. Like, I can't say enough about it. I love this sweater. So the first question on the chopping block is, how does clinical practicum work in your graduate program? We are limited to how many credits we can take. I've always pushed that past its boundaries, especially because I also did research, which I got credit for, and that was, I would say, around 3 or 4 credits itself. Then also your clinical practicum itself is going to count toward like around 3 to 5 credits depending, and then you have a bunch of classes that you're supposed to take. So in my program at University of Buffalo, we took courses of the first year, fall, spring, summer, fall, and then in the last spring of your program, you can take courses. It's highly suggested. You're not supposed to. I decided I didn't need to take any more courses, and I'm only doing research, and I'm not taking any credits for research. I'm just finishing up a project, and then that last spring is supposed to be all externship experience, so no coursework. You will be expected to work in the clinic at University of Buffalo from your first fall all the way until your last fall. So you will be working over the summer. Like I said, this is really different. I had a different experience because of COVID, but I think there's been some changes in our field, like telehealth, SimuCase, where we've been seeing a rise in using those types of services. I mean, SimuCase isn't really a service. It's just kind of like a learning program. But telehealth, I think, really helped some of my clients, actually. They benefited from that, and we might even see more of that going on in the future. So getting back to the question, how does clinical practicum work in specifically University of Buffalo's clinical program? It will change depending on program, because some programs don't have you working in the clinic right away. They have you just taking classes for the first semester or 2. So if you're applying to programs, just keep that in mind. Like, every program is going to run differently. I liked just getting right on the ball with clinical experience. I thought it was so helpful for me as a clinician, and it really broke down that barrier of nervousness too, because it's like it can be so nerve-wracking before your first session, before your first client, but being able to just get rolling with it is so important, because I think that's kind of how it's going to be like for the rest of your career. Is there's going to be moments where you're just jumping into it and you have very little knowledge, and you just have to make the most of it and prepare as much as possible afterwards for your next session. Next question is, what does an average day in the program look like? So pre-COVID, average day, I would prepare for my client that I had that day. So if I had to print out any materials, if I needed them laminated, I would get that all done. I would study for my class if I had a test or a quiz, which I usually did, finish assignments. So usually in a typical day, you're doing both class and clinic. And then I also had a work study job. So I would go to my work study job in between classes, or my schedule worked really well so that I ended my day with my work study job, and I just went home after that to do homework and whatever I needed to do. The thing is, your average day-to-day is going to change a lot. So something I really struggled with when I first entered my program is I did not have a lot of control over my schedule. And I'm not a control freak by any means, but I'm a person that takes on a lot of different responsibilities. So I need a level of consistency. Woo! I use my hands way too much. I need a level of consistency and structure, and I think you have to throw that mindset out the door, because there's going to be a lot of moments where you don't have control over your schedule. Your clients can only come in certain days, or whatever the case might be. Your class is only offered at this certain time, so you have to be really flexible, very flexible, in order to be successful in this program, no matter if you're at UB or not. It's just, that is going to be, and that is a good skill to learn as you become a professional too, because that's how the real life is as well. And then during COVID was a little different. So at first the clinic was closed, and we did SimuCase, which is a program where we still gained clinical hours from pre-recorded cases, and we'd either have to do evaluations or treatment plans on these computerized characters. A lot of them were actually real cases. They're just given different names, so it's de-identified. I really loved the program. And then we did a lot of telehealth. By the time we started doing in-person clients again, I think it was late summer to early fall when we started. I remember going out on screens, going to schools and screening preschool students and kindergarten students. I had a client who was in person, and then I did a lot of telehealth as well. Still worked my classes, still worked my job. Did I say worked my classes? Still had classes, still worked my job. Like I said, that idea of flexibility and really adapting some of the characteristics of being patient, being ready to do something on the fly is really important. In everyday life as a graduate student, sometimes they're like, hey, can you run this test? Or will you be available at this time to see someone? You kind of just have to do it. But you gain a lot of skill and knowledge from that too, so it's really important. This is going to be a lot of me rambling, I think, because there's so many questions, and I want to make sure that I give as much detail as possible. Is it possible to be involved in an extracurricular activity like band or track or work on the side? It is. It's possible, but it's really difficult. By no means am I boasting at all, because if I had the chance to change a couple things, I definitely would. But I think by far in my program, I was doing the most. And I burned out. I definitely burned out. And I even have a video planned on burnout, because I learned a lot through their process. It's possible to have a job and work. I worked work study job. I had a couple on the side jobs. Those ended when COVID hit because I was laid off. But Luckily, my work study job was able to keep me, but that's because it's a scholarship, an allocated fund. I can even talk about work study as well in another video because I think it's so great. It's such a great option for students who still need to earn money while going to school. It is possible to have hobbies on the side. I had several. I did research, which isn't really a hobby, but it took a lot of time out of my week. I would say 10 to 15 hours of time every week. And I wasn't even in the lab at the time of COVID. I was just having to read a lot of research and write a lot of reviews, and that took a decent chunk of my week. I was actively involved in volunteer work. I worked with the Miss America organization throughout almost my entire graduate program, and that was really intense, just doing all of the requirements for that and just everything I wanted to get done. And, I am so appreciative of the experience, but I would have to say anyone who is going into this program, just really have a full understanding that your schedule needs to be open as much as possible. You're going to need time to dedicate to preparing for your clients, which I wish I had done more of. It's a learning curve. You're not going to be perfect, and I am by no means saying that I'm perfect. So I would definitely say it's possible. I'll leave it at that. How did I know this master's program was for me? So there's a couple of different types of masters out there. There's MA, MS, MSED, and I think there's a couple others out there too. But in general, I figured it out kind of the hard way. So I originally was going to apply for PhD programs because I wanted to specialize in voice therapy, voice diagnosis, and working with professional singers. I had an interview with a lab in Ohio, and she was the nicest woman, but she really kind of laid it out for me and said, it sounds like you really want to work with people. That is your passion, and you could still pursue a PhD, but definitely get your master's first, get your feet wet in the clinical field, and then think about it afterwards. It was so hard in the moment, that moment of rejection. You're like, especially it was something I really wanted to do, but she was absolutely right, because now that I'm reflecting back on it, I'm like, especially because of COVID, it would have been really tricky to run a research project in person out of state. So everything happens for a reason, but for me, she's right. I definitely love working with people, and I think that was a really great step for me in the first place. And I think if you're confused on which route you should go, if you should go into PhD programs, if you should do your MA, some schools offer a combined dual program where you can do both. Just do your research, do a lot of soul searching, be truthful to yourself. Don't think about the status of having a PhD. Think about what you truly want out of your degrees, out of your life, and then make a choice from there. And always know you can do it later on in the future too. I might go back and do a PhD in the future, or I might not. I don't know. It was something I was so sure I wanted to do, and I'm really fortunate that things work out the way that they did. Do grades matter? This is a lovely question. This is a great question, because I want to be careful how I say this, because it's important to take your classes seriously. You need to study and prepare for your classes because, yes, you want to do well in them, but they help prepare you for the future. I saw my classes as a way to understand how to approach clients later on, not just taking classes to take classes. I think that's more of an undergraduate mindset anyways, of I just got to get these classes done and do well. If you're an undergrad looking to apply for college, to grad school, they are going to be looking for a certain GPA. If you're a graduate student and you're not looking to go for a PhD, then I would say just pass your classes with what you need to. Make sure you're retaining the material so that when you go into the real world, you know how to navigate certain caseloads. But for the most part, when you're in grad school and you're not looking to go for a PhD, what's really going to matter is the quality of the work that you're putting into your clients, not so much your grade on a paper. And it can be a huge change in mindset for a lot of people. But at the same time, like, you're there to gain clinical judgment. Once you're in your program, they already know that you're academically strong. They're looking to grow your clinical skills, grow your clinical judgment. So grades do matter, but they're not the most important thing by far. Does undergraduate experience make a difference once you're in your program? It can. It definitely can. It helps. So I have a background in psychology, and specifically like neuroanatomy and all of that. I didn't take much social or developmental psych classes, many of those. I did find it helped me in understanding like stroke and TBI and some of those more medical types of cases. I think also it helped me see things through another perspective, especially since I really interested in counseling and whatnot. And in a lot of your cases, you might have to do some counseling of parents, of individuals themselves. So I thought that was really helpful for me. A lot of people do have other backgrounds other than just CDS. They might have counseling minors, or they might have other languages. That, I think that is what will help you the most if you majored or minored in another language: Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, American Sign Language. Those things come in handy and actually increases your market value once you're looking for a job. Let me tell you that. That is something I wish I would have done as an undergrad, is taken a language as a minor or a major so I could become really strong and confident in it. And that's something I think I'm going to be doing in the future. Hint, hint. Learning other languages, because it just really helps you become a better clinician and person overall. And I plan on traveling once COVID has died down and it becomes safe to travel. So that would really help in real life. How did I fund my degree? How did I fund my degree? Like I mentioned earlier, I worked multiple jobs, and then I constantly looked for scholarships. Constantly. It's really important. I know it seems like not the most fun thing to do, to take an hour or two out of your day to look and apply for scholarships. Once you get a good template of a scholarship, it's easy to just copy and paste and to change things up once in a while. I can even make a video on that. But I did that. I earned thousands of dollars in scholarships in the last couple of years. And that's because I took out the time to apply, research them, and apply. What does your average caseload look like? This is going to depend on who you have as a supervisor and what is available for your clinic. So I know some universities are partnered with other organizations, and they'll let you go to those organizations and study, whether it be like a hospital or whatnot. And I'm not even talking about externship. I'm just talking about their regular curriculum, clinical curriculum. For us at University of Buffalo, I started out working with aphasia. So I worked with an individual who had aphasia, and then I worked in aphasia group. Then the next semester, I worked with AAC, worked with articulation. What else? I worked some really cool different types of cases. If you have an AAC specialist at your program, definitely just soak in all of that information if you can, because first of all, there's so many cool devices that they have now that you can try and for yourself and with your clients. And I think we're going to see more of it in the future, especially as technology advances. It's really an awesome part of the field to know about. And I'm really fortunate to have that experience. Okay, but as far as what the caseload will look like, you'll see a variety of different disorders, whatever is available in your area. Like I know in Ohio, they have a huge cleft palate population, so they see more of that in Ohio. It just really depends on your demographics of where you're at, what your university might specialize in, and then the types of supervisors that you have there. But you should always you are required to have both child and adult experiences. I worked with Parkinson's patients. I'm just trying to think of other things off the top of my head. I did a lot of school screenings, got a lot of hours doing that. When we went back to the clinic, still during the pandemic, we had masks and face shields. We had to clean everything very thoroughly after each client. So when you're working with kids, you'll have like little Legos and just like all these little things, little parts. You can have hundreds of them. I would suggest if your clinic doesn't provide it, bring like a Lysol spray. That really gets all of those nooks and crannies really well while covering like hundreds of little pieces. I would definitely suggest getting that. And then sometimes they even have masks. I tried it out myself. There's a mask with like a little window for articulation. Some people loved it. Some people didn't like it. Some kids are kind of afraid of them. And some kids are just fine with it. So I would say if you have an in-person client and you're using PPE, do whatever feels comfortable for you and is safe, but also get a feel for what is best for your client as well. Like if you're doing articulation and they need to see your mouth with a window, wear one of those masks. It might not be the most comfortable, but you're also there to help the child grow. Teletherapy is mostly done over Zoom for our program anyways, and there's so many different online resources that you can use and utilize. We used YouTube videos. I can try to make a whole video on online teletherapy resources. Now that I think about it, that would be a great resource or a great video to make. Just be aware that there's going to be technical issues, and sometimes you might end up spending the entire session sorting out technical issues, which is so unfortunate, but that's just the nature of how it is. So you have to be really patient and try to learn as much about the platform that you're using so that you can troubleshoot immediately if you need to. Okay, my light died, so I had to charge, but what I was about to say is that actually leads right into our next question, which is how do you navigate telehealth? So I basically covered a lot with telehealth, but I didn't mention that with the pandemic, we had a lot more co-clinicianing partnerships when treating and evaluating clients. So before COVID, I mostly had my own clients that I would prepare for every week or every other day, whatever the case was. But when COVID hit, everyone needed their hours, and the best way to get that was by having combined partnered sessions. So this co-clinicianing practice really came important to learn how to navigate, and a huge part of the remainder of my program. It made things both easy and difficult. So the difficult part is coordinating times to meet with your partner to talk about materials for the next session or just progress of the client in general. And then also you have to coordinate times to meet with your supervisor, with your co-clinician. It made it easier at the same time though too, because you have two brains working on the same case. I remember when I was working with an articulation client, the audio that was coming through my laptop was really muffled and it was broken up, so I couldn't really hear that well. And my co-clinician was like, okay, she definitely did this, she definitely did that, and then we would cover for each other sometimes. It was really good to have that partnership. when going into a session. Okay, so then there was another question I got, which was, is it easier working by yourself or with a co-clinician? I'd say I'd like both. There's pros and cons to both. Another thing too is we as second years had mentees. We were mentors, and my mentees did a great job on their own. I barely did any work in those sessions because they had one client that they were working on. So I really let them take the reins, and then I was just there for support, to look over progress notes, to look over their end of the semester paperwork, to look over some of their session materials, and they were amazing on their own. Like, they didn't even need me, which was great. Like, I got so lucky to have really great mentees. But for the cases that I did not have any mentees on, I actually did like partnering with someone on those cases. But I also do like running sessions myself too, because it's really easy for me to get the materials all together whenever, and I don't have to double check them through like 6 million people. So this is the last question. How do you build professional references? That's a solid question. And it's also something that you're going to be actively doing anyways without realizing it. So eventually, all of your peers and colleagues are going to be professional relationships. So you want to build good relationships with the peers around you, because you might have to work with them again in the real world outside of your university clinic. Also, work on having a strong relationship with your supervisor. Like, you have to learn how to navigate those miscommunications. You have to learn different types of communication styles and supervisor styles. When you go into your CF, you'll get paired up with a supervisor, which will be hopefully more compatible. But when you're in a clinical program, you're constantly rotating through different supervisors, and they might have different requirements for paperwork and whatnot. I know, like, some of my supervisors required very detailed language when it came to paperwork, whereas my other supervisor, she was like, make it short, sweet, that's all I need to know. So it's really important to have a good understanding of how your supervisors work so that you can prepare what they need, and then and it overall just makes things so much easier. Like, you don't have to go and do revisions if you're keeping track of what your supervisor likes, what style they like as far as report writing. And always ask about feedback. Don't be afraid of, I don't want to say negative comments, but don't be afraid of learning how to do something better. Like, you always have to be willing to adapt to the different types of clinic culture that you might be experiencing. Every clinic runs a little bit differently. If you're looking to build professional relationships, they're all around you. They're in your classes. They're everywhere. They're even on social media. On social media, if you're following your peers on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, like, those, make sure that you're remaining professional at least, because that could affect you like 10 years down the line. As far as references in particular, yeah, like, your supervisors should be some of the first references you go for, and you ask. And then, of course, your professors. Sometimes there's overlap between your supervisors and your professors, but then you can always go to your professors for a reference if you need to, but I would always suggest going to your supervisors first. Also, just general tips when looking to build professional relationships between your peers and your supervisors and with your clients. Keep up with your end of the work. Like, don't slack off, because especially when you're working in a group or with a partner, if you put in what you're supposed to be doing and keep accountable for yourself, and your partner does the same, everything will go a lot more smoothly. But when you fail to keep up with your end of the work and your end of things, it makes it so much harder for your partner. And it's so unfortunate because like I feel like we've all been in those situations. But what I've learned in particular is I've learned to work through those scenarios. Like whether it was me, like if I know that I'm gonna need some extra time on paperwork or preparing materials or whatever the case is, I make sure that my partner knows, like, hey, I'm not going to get to this till Monday. Is that okay with you? And see what they say. I wouldn't leave your partner in the dark. It's just not professional, and it causes a lot of stress. Like it's just unnecessary stress that you have to deal with. Like there's already enough going on in the world. So be accountable for yourself. Be truthful when you need more time on something, and don't be afraid to speak up about it. So since that was the last of the questions about surviving grad school, there's going to be more to come about the application process and maybe some other things. So be on the lookout for that. Until then, I will see you next Friday.